Welcome back to Kentucky. And if you're noticing the spelling on that title, nope, that's not an error. Because today we're driving one of the more well-known trails in the Red River Gorge. But is it Punkin Hollow or Pumpkin Hollow? The answer to that is yes. It's both. It just depends on whether you start in the south like we did at Punkin Hollow or whether you start in the north from Pumpkin Hollow. Regardless of where you start, make sure to stop and air down those tires before traveling onwards. After passing through a small area of private homes, you'll find yourself crossing the right fork of Cane Creek. And just up a little farther than that, well, you're going to cross Cane Creek again, but this time the crossing is much more scenic. So don't forget to get out that camera. Both OnX and Trails Off-Road use the more traditional spelling of Pumpkin Hollow Road. They both agree that this particular trail is only about 3.5 miles in length. One of them rates it at a level 4 and one at a level 5. This road is often wet, muddy, and deteriorating. It's also included as part of the Daniel Boone Backcountry Byway, as well as the Kentucky Adventure Tour. With a pedigree like that, it's no wonder this trail is so popular. If you come in from the south like we did on Punkin Hollow Road, that first couple miles of trail, you're going to wonder why in the world did they rate this a 4 or a 5? The road here is typically fairly smooth and easy, but then you come over the top of that first major hill. And as the saying goes, it's all downhill from here. Thankfully, it starts out with just some small little rocky challenges. And if you came in from the direction we did, even these larger steps really aren't that horrible of a challenge. We drove this trail on a foggy, cool fall day, where the rain would occasionally spit down on top of us. But if you drive this road during the summer or the spring, you're likely to encounter a lush green paradise. If you traveled through this area 100 years ago, you would likely have encountered a much more lush and wild landscape. You also might have encountered many people hiding out in the hollows between the mountains, making moonshine during the Prohibition era from 1920 to 1933. The Red River Gorge was such a popular place for making moonshine that agents could often be found climbing up those big cliff sides, looking out over the mountains for those telltale signs of smoke. One of the many raids in the area, it happened only about 5 miles from Pumpkin Hollow, and it turned into a week-long moonshine war that garnered national attention. On December 9, 1922, 2 Prohibition agents and a group of deputies went to the Ballard farm to execute a search warrant. Although Jeff Ballard denied any involvement in an illegal distillery, further investigation led to the discovery of a hidden bunker down by the creek camouflaged by brush. One agent began to beat on the shuttered window of the fortification with a stick, but was quickly killed by a hail of bullets from inside. The assailants inside, they pinned down the remaining agents and deputies until they had to retreat. The next day, the Prohibition Bureau Director arrived and organized a posse, eventually including 15 men who went back to the Ballard farm. They discovered 17 barrels and fermenters, 40 gallons of moonshine, and 1,400 gallons of beer. They also discovered that at least one still had been recently removed from the fortification. As that posse began to search nearby, more gunfire erupted, killing a 24-year-old deputy. The posse eventually retreated again, leaving several of the Ballards on the run. The Kentucky governor at that point offered a $500 reward for the capture of Robert and Charles Ballard related to the 2 murders. A few days later, on December 15th, 20 deputies and agents walked from the post office to the Ballard farm again. After the ensuing gun battle, the agents this time did manage to capture 2 Confederates of the Ballards, and they found Bob Ballard dead on the floor of a cabin. But unfortunately, another deputy was killed, and Charlie Ballard was still on the run. Charlie Ballard had been injured so badly in the gunfight, however, that the next day he turned himself in. Although a state court eventually acquitted Charlie Ballard of charges against him, a federal court found him guilty of several and sentenced him to 6 years in prison. The Menifee Moonshine War made national news, but was the last of the big raids in this area. Driving through the trees and hills of this countryside, it's very easy to imagine the Ballards back in the day, making moonshine and beer in their fortification in the woods. I hope you enjoyed our trip across Pumpkin Hollow today, while learning a little bit about the moonshine history of the area. Where are we headed next? Why, we're heading the same place that most people head right after Pumpkin Hollow, or before it. Next, we're headed to travel on Spas Creek Road. And if you thought Pumpkin Hollow had lots of mud holes and water crossings, wait until you see this trail. Thanks for watching. Now go out and find your own adventure.